Hello and welcome to this inaugural Transforming Construction Network Plus Constructive Conversations webinar. I'm Kell Jones and I'll be your chair for the session today. Joining me today are three great presenters. I've got Trudi Sully from the Construction Innovation Hub, Dr Luigi Mosca from the Imperial College London, and joining us on the phone, having some internet issues, is Toby Uppington from AECOM. I'll be introducing them all individually before they speak to you. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Transforming Construction Network Plus, it's a collaboration between three universities: University College London, where I work, Imperial College London, and the University of Warwick. And the Network Plus was set up to help support the Transforming Construction Challenge and the transformation of the industry by forming a bridge between academia, industry, and policymakers. And we do this by forming communities both in the UK and internationally, communities of interest. And within those communities, we help to develop and share new knowledge, new business models, and to encourage investment in research across the construction industry to establish a long-lasting legacy for the Transforming Construction Challenge. Now, the format for today is hopefully quite conversational. I've asked each of the speakers to prepare 5 minutes of presentation on a subject that I've given them: platforms, platform thinking, and the future of construction. And we'll use those presentations as a jumping off point for our conversation going forwards, in which we can explore ideas with each other and share insights. Of course, we'd like to get insights and questions from you, so please do use the Q&A box on GoToWebinar, and we'll pick up as many of those questions as we can during the session. So, to our first speaker, Trudi joins us from the Construction Innovation Hub today, where she is the Impact Director for Manufacturing. Now, in her role there, Trudi works with policymakers and organisations across the construction supply chain to develop insights that ensure the delivery of impact from the Construction Innovation Hub, value for money, and to provide demonstrable evidence of industry transformation at scale. Now, I've given Trudi the subject of platforms to go for. So, Trudi, over to you.
Thanks, Cal. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. And I think webinars like this, at times like this, are a really great opportunity to share what's going on. So I'm just checking to see that I've got control of the presentation now. Okay, so just to position things ever so slightly and very briefly, as Cal said, I work for the Construction Innovation Hub. So this is a £72 million grant funded from government programme. We're working over 4 years and we're sort of 1.5 years into that programme. This is all about collaboration and innovation and looking at addressing the challenges in construction. The programme itself is structured against 4 themes: value, manufacturing, assurance and digital. But we also have the very, very vital element of partnering with government departments and with industry. That's moved on a bit quick, but so part of this programme will be outputs that are both physical and digital, and our objectives are to have impact on society, both through economic and social aspects. The platform construction system is one of the key parts of the programme, and that's the area under manufacturing that I look after. So what we're doing as part of that programme is to develop, prototype, test and demonstrate a standardised construction platform that can deliver against social infrastructure and application to other building types. Our primary target is those government departments we're working with, but we also need to make sure that this is something that is applicable and more widely adoptable. It has to be implementable at scale, it has to be able to deliver with active energy, and it has to fulfill a number of objectives which will actually prove as a benefit to the wider audience and industry overall. It builds on the IPA's call for evidence on a platform for design for manufacturing assembly. We will be producing, as part of this, integrated assemblies, interface standards, rules, specifications that will form the structure of the platform, which is centrally owned and managed. But we're working with industry partners that will help us produce this kit of parts, and that's part of the element that they'll be owning. the whole system is broken down into 13 components, and we've got teams that are working together to develop those individual components. We're also working with the government departments as our client voice to ensure that we can actually deliver against their needs in the most effective way, and that is informing our design process. Ultimately, we'll build a proof of demonstrator building that everybody will be able to visit and learn and see and experience what this is. So at the moment, this program is established against systems engineering approaches, and these breakdown sections here relate to those sort of stages of the program. We're at quite an early stage, but it's a very significant investment in time and effort and upskilling learning right now to define the needs against that government voice client voice even, and therefore be able to deliver the most effective system overall. Against that, we've also got our construction quality planning guide, which is currently out for consultation. And please, please, please go to the Construction Innovation Hub website to have a look at that and feedback on what you think. This is helping us develop the manufacturing approaches with our industry partners to be able to deliver higher quality more effectively, more efficiently, more productively, and more. Next one, please. Sorry, so this is just a quick demonstration of some of the partners we're working with, and just to reiterate, it's incredibly important that we are working with such a diversity of partners. These people are working with us on the platform program, but that said, there will be opportunities for other people to feed in, both in terms of parts of the consultations as part of the wider hub program overall, and to be able to benefit from the outputs of the program that we will be sharing with everybody as we go, because we are here to deliver for the wider industry and for the benefit of society overall, not just for those partners that are working with us at the moment.
We seem to be losing audio from Trudi.
I think that's the end.
Okay.
So if the last slide comes up, it's staccato from my end. I can hear okay here. Is that better? So fortunately, that is the end. These are the links. Please have a look at our website. It is about to be revamped. There'll be a lot more information on it in the middle of next month. But join us, follow us, connect with us, feedback to us, please.
Okay. I think the message there was please have a look at the website and feedback on the consultation programs. Trudi, you were breaking up a little bit there, so hopefully I didn't misinterpret what you just said. So thank you for that, Trudi. There's a couple of comments and questions that have appeared on the question box, but I'm going to hold those for now and jump straight into the next presentation, which is from Dr. Luigi Mosca, who's at Imperial College. Luigi is a research fellow who's part of the Center for Systems Engineering and Innovation, I got it right that time, at Imperial, and is working with me on the research angle for the Transforming Construction Network Plus. Together we are exploring how businesses are changing their business models in response to the benefits that are available through the use of digital technologies and manufacturing processes. I've given Luigi the topic of platform thinking to give us 5 minutes on. Over to you, Luigi.
Thank you, Kell, for the invitation, for the nice introduction. As you were saying, I'm with you working on the research team, the research part of the Transforming Construction Network Plus. And a few months ago, we decided to publish a digest titled Platform Thinking for Construction. Our aim was to basically summarize the academic literature about platform in digestible way. So basically in non-academic terms. So this is for different audience. We aim to target different audience like industry expert and policymakers. What we did, we identified 4 main different types of platform. One is the platform-based organization, is when basically the platform, when the company acts itself as a platform, and is going through, how is it doing this? Through a very lean structure and relying on established contract relationship. An example in construction could be a tier 1 contractor. The second type is the product platform. It is when a company, they establish a very stable central technical architecture and a range of peripheral components that allow them to establish a product family portfolio. We haven't seen yet a lot of examples of this in construction, but we hope that probably in the future we can see more. These 2 types of platform, basically what they do, they rely on complementary assets that are provided within the boundary of the forum. Then we identified other 2 types of company or platform that they rely on complementary assets that they are provided outside the boundary of companies. These are the platform ecosystem, which is basically a network organization linked to a focal firm or platform, that the real value here is by coordinating the complementary assets. We have some nice examples from construction, like Autodesk inventory system. The 4th type is the market intermediary platform, where here the platform, the role is to facilitate the transaction between buyer and sellers. The value is created by removing bottlenecks and reducing the transaction cost. Here in the UK, we have brickhandler.com, that is a market for the bricks here in the UK. To summarize, we can see a lot of platform thinking in construction. I'm sure later on we discuss and we have a conversation about these. We have 2 different types of platform, open and closed platform. And if you want to find out more, you can download our digest under the link right under the lower right corner here on the slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Luigi. And we'll be providing links to the digest and our one on business models as well towards the end of the presentation, and we'll hopefully in the email following on from our presentations. Thank you. Now, turning to our final presentation, we've got Toby Uppington joining us by telephone. Toby is AECOM's Director of Strategic Planning for EMEA. Now, as well as his strategic role in assessing and prioritising and implementing opportunities for AECOM, Tony has championed the adoption and commercialisation of a digital design for manufacture and assembly process at AECOM. And that's led to their entry into the UK volumetric residential market. I'm really hoping we get to talk about that during our conversation later on. Toby, over to you.
Thanks, Kel. The irony of being asked to talk about the future of construction and technology whilst my internet goes down is not lost on me. But notwithstanding this, I didn't have any slides. So I'll give you maybe a few minutes on my opinion of the future of construction. And obviously nothing is set in stone, and we all look forward to seeing what actually transpires. Perhaps before talking about the future, it's worth just benchmarking where we are today. And the construction industry has evolved to a place where all of the component processes that are required to specify, design, cost, procure, build, and operate infrastructure have all been separated out to the individual service level, creating multiple handovers between designers, cost managers, builders, and operators, which is sort of the opposite of the platform approach that Luigi and Trudi have outlined, and that's causing quite a lot of value leakage. Construction is really risk management, and we have general contractors who currently act as the integrator for all of these disparate services to bring things together to realize an outcome building. The state of the industry continues to evolve, and there are once emergent themes around social value, sustainability, and resilience around how infrastructure is designed, built, and operated that are becoming ever stronger. And it's changing the conversation in a healthy way towards how infrastructure actually performs on a holistic basis, rather than the role of an individual technical discipline or construction as a standalone one-off purchase. It's acting as a pull for a more integrated platform response from the industry. Issues such as the disasters of Grenfell, the challenges we're currently facing around COVID, leading to conversations around cladding and social distancing, are also changing the conversation towards how easily do we manage challenges like retrofitting, maintenance, and managing the cost of change. And the industry has a very well recognized challenge around productivity and lack of innovation, coupled with a poorly balanced apportionment of risk and profitability. All of these trends are suggesting that the future of construction has to be open to new approaches, but one that has failed to grasp the nettle around a really compelling case. But I think we're almost there. The client side pull for faster, cheaper, and better will never go away, and it will drive the market to respond whether we like it or not. And the industry is already starting to move. I think you've seen from Trudi there some of the opportunities out there. I think where we find ourselves today is at a place where we can actually get over the hump that we failed to in the past. And the reason for that is the development of technology. We're finally in a place where digital tools are enabling the integration and the pulling back of all of those individual services in a non-linear fashion, allowing people to co-create and reduce risk much earlier in the process. We've started to find a way to resolve clashes before we start construction, to move more towards manufacturing and designing out risks and working with tolerances that were previously impossible. In the future, I think we shall focus much less on inputs, like how many bricks we need to build a building, but more towards outputs or performance, underpinned by considerations of whole life value. I'd like to think the conversation will move away from the customer saying, I would like a brick-built building, to the customer saying, what I really need is a space that will respond over time to meet my evolving needs to provide an attractive, secure, comfortable, affordable place to live over the next 20 years. Now, that conversation is forcing builders to start to behave a lot more like designers, and designers to behave a lot more like builders, and a blurring of the expectations and the liabilities between these individual disparate services. From the client, it's also creating an expectation that infrastructure can be constructed to allow interchangeability over time, with maintenance and end-of-life recovery integral parts of their own decision-making process. So I think the future of construction is therefore going to be much more like assembly than construction, where risks are removed or reduced in advance of any of the ground being broken. This allows us to move much of the process off-site to safer, better assured production lines, with concepts such as kits of parts, ecosystems of aligned components, all at a variety of different scales, allowing customers choice on solutions. And customers trading off function and cost appropriately as their basis of selecting a provider. Now, as this transition occurs, it will allow us to move away from buying a service to actually buying a product. An example that kind of Luigi alluded to earlier. There's a variety of other models out there in parallel industries, things like aviation engines, where you don't buy an engine, you buy hours of uptime in the air, or indeed mobile phones, where you may buy a contract to provide a piece of hardware that's interchangeable over time with a variety of different component providers who support the functionality of that phone. Clients paying for utility rather than a service. If we sort of bring that full circle to construction platforms, I think that potential future could be really well represented by a platform approach. But, as Luigi's already alluded to, someone will still have to hold the can. It needs a clear allocation of risk and reward, and clarity as to who the customer interfaces with to deliver their expectations, but also who they turn to if things aren't as they expected, that facilitator approach. In Luigi's work, I think the concept of a core asset, perhaps a base assembly system, process, people, and relationships, backed by an interface, and this probably being some form of integrated digital system, it is really, really interesting. And in this platform world, one which is focused more on product and performance, the concept of brand becomes ever more important. And these core assets will have to evolve a brand with an associated value proposition that customers believe in and can trust. Now, as providers focus on the brand of their product, it reinforces the need to manage risk and reputation. I think in this product space, there is an ecosystem that is huge, providing massive opportunity for peripheral components to be provided in the construction world. Perhaps again, that analogy of apps on your Apple or your Samsung phone. And I think this should be driving new supply chain opportunities for all sorts of traditional providers and new providers. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how today's players choose to evolve and what new entrants disrupt the market. I think the market has got lots of space for a variety of open, semi-open, and closed platforms, giving customers choice, and it will be the market that drives the actual outcomes. I'd sort of close the opening piece, Kel, by saying that in my mind, if we move to a brand-led product environment, innovation becomes ever more transparent and driven by market demand, and productivity is intimately linked to the cost of production. That solves the two root cause problems that the industry faces today.
Wow, quite a lot to digest there, Toby. Thank you. I'm fascinated by the idea of us buying brands. I can see Louis Vuitton giving us a home in the future, maybe. But that sounds as though it's going to fundamentally change how we buy buildings. And are our current systems, the current way we make and buy buildings, are they set up to actually allow us to buy brands? Trudi, what do you think about that? Can't hear you. That's usually my job. Are you on? No, we've lost you.
Want to unmute.
Oh, there we go.
Is that there now? Okay. Sorry, that took many more clicks than it needed to unmute, but somebody had to do it. Toby, I think that was a great summary, and actually a lot of what you reflected are areas that we're discussing and are part of our platform development program. So it's great to have that commonality of perspective. Brand is actually really important. It's one of the things that we discussed in one of our first workshops with the companies that we're working with as part of developing the platform, when we looked at how many different elements will have to change to deliver. So it's not just about developing a platform system, but everything that will support it. And that's why the program that we have split into these themes, particularly relating to procurement, and of course through that the value framework that we're delivering, that some of you may have, there was a webinar last week that my colleague Ron Lang, who's the Impact Director for Value, was on, and his lead on that and the work they're doing is about developing an industry-wide definition of value, which takes into account more than the capital cost and starts looking at those broader perspective and requirements. And ultimately what we want to do is call on government to embed that procure for value approach for public procurement, as I said, our focus, but something that will actually be of benefit to all. So that's being set up. Now we're working with another range of industry partners and industry bodies on that. It's based on the 5 capitals model, and then we've got champions within each of those who will be helping us develop the metrics and the benchmarks to develop a tool that will help inform those decisions in the future.
Toby, how do you respond to that?
I think you're right, Trudi. To go back to your original question, Kel, I mean, I'd love to see you in a Louis Vuitton house, and I think that opportunity of choice of high-end, mid-range, whatever you can afford to achieve the functionality you're looking for, is what we should be aspiring to. the way in which you currently buy a house is totally different from the way in which you buy almost anything else. And there is a lot of commonality in how you buy other products. You can choose, and the analogy of cars is made almost too often, but you can choose to specify your own particular requirements all around an architecture of product choice. The way in which you choose a phone package, you choose a variety of functionality and selection to achieve the trade-off of what you're prepared to pay for what you're prepared to get as an outturn. And I think construction does need to change the way it procures, to move more towards that product-facing mentality, to allow the front-end value to be realized by the people that are trying to change the market. I think we've evolved to a place where it's very piecemeal. There is a lack of certainty, and as I said, that risk apportionment isn't always clearly transferred, and customers end up being frustrated, paying more, and not always getting what they thought they'd get in the first place. So I think there is a real opportunity to start from procurement and look at, as Trudi says, procuring for value is a really interesting concept. Procuring product rather than services is a really interesting concept, and there's a variety of ways to go, but we're not there yet.
And in that, I mean, it sounds fantastic and wonderful aspirations that we can procure these buildings by value, and the value that the client or the customer, if you're looking at a product, attributes to that brand. But how do we move from where we are today, where we're buying the designer, the contractor, the fit out all separately, to where we procure the building on the basis of value? So what needs to happen to get us from where we are today to where we need to be?
I sort of turn to Luigi. I think there's a huge opportunity to change the language in how we procure. And I think some of the suggestions of the archetypes and the language that Luigi set out provide some useful backbones to look at changing procurement.
Do you want to come back on that, Luigi?
I do agree with this, and actually I was thinking, I have a kind of a reaction to all this. If a kind of platform owner, right, in some extent, can identify and select the opportunity choices, right, that Toby was mentioning before, how this fits with the market demand innovation? And I have more a kind of question for both of you, because I say that there is a kind of trade-off that we need to balance. What do you think, Toby?
Well, as I sort of tried to sort of outline at the beginning, I think products are successful because customers like them. And customers have different needs, but one of the things customers quite often like to see is innovation. And it may be continuous innovation, so that the product they buy evolves over time and continues to respond to their changing needs. Or it could be a product that has innovation built into it to make part of its value proposition more valuable than another customer. And it may be innovation around bringing the price down. It may be innovation around the functionality. It may be innovation around the aesthetics. It may be innovation around the adaptability of that building going forward. But it's the customer's desire to purchase the product that leads to the demand to the product provider to continually innovate and beat its own competition.
You're speaking there, so putting a product hat on, it sounds quite a closed system. So Luigi talked about closed and open platforms, and we'll come on to ecosystems in a bit. But Trudi, you're working in a much more open environment with lots and lots of collaborators. So how do you shepherd innovation in that context?
Shepherd is a good question. So what we're trying to do is actually, again, building on experience of the partners that are working on the program overall, we know that we can have a far greater impact and we can innovate more effectively if we get people to collaborate. So you'll have seen from the list of the partners that are working on the platform that I put up, a lot of them are traditionally competitors, but what they have come to realize is that they have very common challenges that are holding them all back, and through working together they can be more innovative, create better market demand through driving improved quality and production approaches, and therefore actually compete again, but have a much better place. And that, you know, the diversity of the people we've got involved also really drives the innovation. So some of them have completely different and significantly clashing perspectives, but because they're starting to work together, they're really feeding off that, and I think we get better results as a consequence of it. And again, what we're doing in terms of delivering against or showing the where demand can come from, if we can work with the government departments and they start procuring our social infrastructure using the tools that are being developed, and they can then demonstrate through what is delivered higher quality, lower cost, better whole life value, then that is a pretty obvious driver in its own right, certainly for government, but I can't see why those same drivers wouldn't also strongly influence the private sector.
Okay, so it sounds to me as though you're encouraging your members or the people on your platform working groups to collaborate on the rules of the game and then competing on the delivery. So that's a well-known way of doing this. There's also Bryden would have also published lots on platforms. Luigi, how do you see Bryden Wood fitting into the sort of the space around, I don't quite know how to fit it in, between the Construction Innovation Hub's open system and AECOM's seemingly more closed system?
That's a good point, and I think basically the idea behind of to be open, it's almost the same, and I think this can be quite very similar, if you like. Even though I see that the work by Trudi, it's really at the industry level, right? If I'm correct. I do see this a great opportunity for innovation, because the complementary asset, everything that is around can be brought from outside, right? So there are more opportunity for innovation, I guess. The question here is, we can develop together the set of rules, but what about the new entrants? So I think there is a good point here about governance. So when we talk about open or close, and this is some similarity here. Instead with Bryden Wood platform, I think they have already, it's open platform, but in some extent they've already defined their own rules, right? So the platform is already in place. And then there is an open collaboration. I can see here the approach to Trudi is slightly different, because they want also from the beginning have this collaboration. Am I correct with these differences?
Okay.
Kell?
Yep, go ahead. I was back to come to you, Toby. Yeah.
I'd like to just come back on one point you said, then I'll comment if I can on what Luigi said. So I don't want to give the impression that I, or indeed AECOM, are suggesting that the future is a closed system. And I think if I use Luigi's language, and he'll tell me if I get it right, my preference is for a sort of semi-open platform organization, which develops product platforms around a common core asset. And that core asset is the piece that may be slightly closed, and that the value and the risk is manifested in. But with an ecosystem of component providers to be able to join in and collaborate to innovate on top of that core asset, probably enabled by an integrated digital system, which again would probably be very open to allow component providers to integrate their solutions on top of that core asset in a manufacturing type mentality. So I don't think the future is it's all black box, you can't see what it is. I think there's a piece in the middle around the core asset, which is around how things are pulled together, how the design process works for manufacturing, how the assembly piece is managed, how the interface risk is managed, particularly for things like, I don't know, fireproofing or waterproofing or insulation, or whatever it may be. Because that's the piece where the liability is manifested. I think there is a huge opportunity for innovation around semi-open closed assets. To Luigi's point around government versus private sector and versus open and closed systems and new entrants, there is obviously a difference in procurement between public and private on a variety of different scales. And the challenge of new entrants is their ability to be able to prove their value proposition, because you've got to do it the first time to be able to rely on it. And I think government has an opportunity to take probably more risk than the private sector does to stimulate new entrants into the marketplace, and could be encouraged in the right environment to take a risk on some new entrant providers to really disrupt the marketplace. I think there are already some private developers who are doing that off their own back, Urban Splash being a sort of case in point, who are already sort of carving a path forward that others are trying to imitate. But I think government has a real opportunity, particularly with its procurement power, to sort of stimulate the market and look at new ways of procurement and new ways of working.
So with that said, and the reason I was going to come to you was to check whether my description of you as closed was a valid one. I think you just said no, and that's fine. Who is the wrong question? The core that you've described will be augmented by all sorts of peripheral components, but where does the brand sit? Is there going to be an AECOM building that you can discernibly say that is an AECOM building, or is it going to be an AECOM core surrounded by somebody else's elevations, for example?
AECOM is bringing a branded housing product to the market under its own unique brand called Inno. It's going deliberately quite slowly. We're in fabrication and about to assemble the first development, and the next ones are already sort of backed up on the production line, ready to go. But it's deliberately a branded product, almost independent of AECOM. Different name. It's designed and built in collaboration with a world-class architect. It's not just on our own. We've brought Roger Stoke Harbour and their well-documented skill set in that space into that partnership to develop that product and that brand. And I would imagine going forward, depending on the success, that independently branded different products would come to market from companies like ourselves in the marketplace, as opposed to getting wrapped up in the confusion of what is a big design, engineering, construction management business on the other side.
And so, Trudi, how does the Construction Innovation Hub's vision for platforms align with that that notion of sort of branded buildings? Whose building would I be buying?
Okay, so the work that we're doing, as I said, is focusing on enabling government to procure and deliver buildings under their remit. And obviously we're all aware of the extensive pipeline that there is for social infrastructure. And indeed, just this week, last week now, there was an update of the procurement that's happening in that area over the next year or so. And there's a considerable amount of energy going into looking at what can be done and how it can be delivered more effectively now. So our platform is working with the MOD, MOJ, Department for Health and Social Care, DFE and DFT, and MHCLG to look at their needs right now and to try and determine how we can deliver a significant proportion of their estate with this platform. And it's not going to be able to do everything, but it is what we can do, looking kind of at an 80-20 approach, if you like. But that system will be open. Who ultimately ends up owning it or branding it, if you like? This work, because it's for that social infrastructure, we would expect the sort of the standards, the design specifications, the rule books for complying with it to be owned by government, perhaps managed by another body in the future that keeps it up to date and conversant with requirements. And then, of course, the individual components and how it's actually delivered would sit with the supply chain. And in terms of what we're doing, we've got integrators who are the ones that are the facilitators and leaders of it. And that's perhaps where that line comes between what is potentially centrally owned and managed and therefore in the government remit in terms of specifications, as opposed to who is actually delivering it and building the supply chains to provide against it, and having their own, therefore, competitive approach to delivering that kind of platform system.
Trudi, could I ask just a quick question, just as a point of clarity? In that model, in the unfortunate event that the building, once in occupation, develops a leak, rainwater starts to get in, how is that issue warranted, and who owns the risk? Is it to do with the maintenance? Is it to do with the installation? Is it to do with the componentry? Is it to do with the base system and how it was designed and configured? Who does the resident turn to rectify that issue and seek compensation?
Yep. So
liability.
I'm not going to suggest that we have all the answers on this front yet. There are a lot of discussions going on around this, but the model that we're working on is rather akin to other manufacturing environments. So you mentioned earlier about too often doing comparisons to automotive, but I'm going to do another one. Aerospace, if you like. But the thing is, there are differences, but you know that these other industries have gone through a lot of these changes themselves. So let's take lessons and learn from their experience and then translate them to be applicable to the specificities of this industry. And that's very much what we're focusing on, is you know, maximizing the opportunity from those translations. So if you have a car and there is a problem with it, that recalls, we all know about where recalls happen on models. So it is the manufacturer that has the responsibility to deal with that, regardless of whether it's a particular component that might be provided by a different provider. But you, as the owner of that car, also have responsibility for the maintenance, and the MOT here. So that kind of system about appropriate maintenance and management of the asset in life is one thing, as opposed to the ownership in terms of the manufacturer, or in the platform program that we're working on, we're talking with our integrator partners about how they would actually ultimately hold that. The thing to consider also is not just that we're suddenly pushing a liability or that ownership onto that integrator, but how, again, the supporting systems reduce that risk, and how adoption of appropriate quality management approaches, how using manufacturing systems will actually significantly reduce that risk before the asset is out there, moving from that defect checking to defect prevention ultimately makes the whole system much lower risk.
Okay, happy with that, Toby?
Almost.
Almost.
I think the opportunity to avoid those issues from coming in the first place are bang on. I think you're right that the customer has a right of recourse to the manufacturer. I think that makes perfect sense, but they have their own obligations around maintenance. And actually, in a product world, I think there is a real opportunity for the product providers to become involved in that maintenance as well. So as I said, it's not construction as a standalone service. the marketplace has an opportunity for you to design, specify, fabricate, install, and maintain that product in life, much in the way in which you do with, say, a boiler or something like that, where your warranty is only valid if you've had a certified maintenance done on an annual basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you say that those sort of analogies, they don't all just translate directly, but it's when you start to explore them, you can see the thread, if you like, of how that could work. And that's what we're working on with the partners, to sort of bring up all the potential challenge areas and try and look at the solutions and build that into the wider program as we develop. But it's not an
it's a work in progress. We've had some questions in, and I'm going to pick up a couple of them together relating to the ideas of around platforms. So from the description of the future that we've envisaged, we have a number of organizations who are developing platforms, and at some point those platforms and the components will all need to be manufactured. Is there a risk that we'll have so many platforms that we'll just have a whole load of companies just going bust? And what does that mean for the sort of standardization approach if everyone's got their own standard interfaces and standard ways of putting things together? I'll just throw that out to the room.
It's an interesting question, actually, and I think that what will need to happen, and what I hope will happen, is that various parties that are developing platforms do actually see the benefits of some alignment, so that they don't actually end up creating a different way of competing that doesn't actually support development and change across the industry and benefits overall in terms of reducing costs while increasing the value. And that we're certainly experiencing that already. The hub platform, the bits that are developed as part of the program will be open and they will be available. This isn't about only the partners that are working on it ultimately benefiting. It's about creating this change for everyone. So, but also we welcome, Bryden Wood was mentioned earlier on. They're a partner on the platform. They've provided their background and their information, and other projects they're working on now are feeding in. We're working with the other UKRI competition winners on platforms that are being developed in slightly different areas. There will be more than one platform. It's, ours is going to be developed for buildings sort of 2 to 4 stories high and 2.5 to 5,000 square meters initially, but we see opportunity for that to fulfill wider specifications, and hopefully that the manufacturers, as in other industries, will start to recognize and work with the platform developers so that there are common interfaces and then their bespoke elements that fit together. So a closed platform might be highly competitive in a very specific area, but the open ones, I think, will fulfill greater needs and have a very strong supply chain, so are probably more fit for the government procurement side of things. Sorry, that was a bit waffly in the end.
It's actually sorry, Toby.
No, go Luigi.
Thank you. I should just say that it's a great point, and actually it's something that I'm really interested in. It's also about this role, right, of the supply chain and the small medium enterprises. How can they bring them broad? I mean, we are going to give them the right support, resource, capabilities to join this ideal platform. Now, in general, with the kind of very established supply chain, I can see a kind of co-investment together, right? So a kind of a large firms that is helping, supporting the supply chain. But when it's so open, when it's a kind of industry platform, we are going to support the small, medium enterprises for this change. Similar question for you, Trudi, and I think also Toby got some reaction on this.
I think, that this is part of the managing expectations, and this isn't going to be a complete transformation overnight. This is going to take years to actually be able to push out there. But what we're recognizing, and I think what everybody recognizes, is that we do have a skills deficit at the moment. We need to look at future skills development, and we need to look at upskilling. So we need to be able to help people that are already out there and working in these kind of environments to adapt their own models and change the way that they deliver, as well as bringing through a new workforce for future delivery. And so we're producing workshops, well, we're running workshops now on methodologies that we're helping develop through the platform and the partners. Those will be made into standalone packages, which will be accessible to the wider audience. And we actually need, part of the communications and engagement plan is about dissemination and sharing and that rollout. And obviously, if we're producing new approaches, what we really need are industry partners and training bodies and consultants to pick those up and help cascade it. So we can get the drivers, we can get the demand, but to actually spread out and help the whole SME supply chain, there's a significant amount of work for us and for the whole of industry to actually develop the opportunities to bring everybody along for the ride.
Toby,
There's a whole well, there's a whole bunch of stuff sort of wrapped around in there. So just maybe very quickly, some people will not succeed. In a new market, there will be products that are brought to market that the market doesn't value, and they will not succeed. However, hopefully many more will succeed, and hopefully traditional existing purveyors will evolve and become very successful. I'm sure some new entrant providers are going to come in and do some amazing things to help transform things. So in terms of that survivability, there's a big opportunity, but people will have to adapt, and not everyone will succeed. I think that around interchangeability, I think that's definitely something that the market will drive. You could argue Apple has made a very successful closed system, particularly with regards to its hardware, and people want it because of its value proposition, and they're prepared to trade off needing 20 different bloody wires for an Apple system as opposed to their Samsung system, because they want what Apple gives them. So the market, I think, will drive some of that interchangeability piece. Around the skills piece, I think that's a really interesting conversation, and sometimes directed in the wrong direction. I think part of the core asset that Luigi's talking about includes the people and the skills in the system associated with that product. And there is a huge opportunity for new providers to build up those training packages, those skill sets, the ways of working that Trudi's alluding to help stimulate that growth. But I think we should also remember that a lot of the design for manufacturing sort of movement we're talking about is involving skills in the design side to simplify the assembly process, to almost de-skill how the buildings themselves are assembled, to make it much more transferable about how and where these buildings could be fabricated. You and I have talked a little bit in the past about the difference of a fixed production facility, i.e. a factory, versus the concept of, call it what you will, a pop-up factory, a floating factory, where pre-manufactured componentry are brought into a secure, dry environment where that assembly can be done by semi-skilled labourers, ideally on the construction site itself, if there is appropriate laydown area, or somewhere in the community, taking advantage of upskilling and bringing in local workforces to build the buildings that they themselves want to live in the future. So I think that the market will drive what is successful, and the evolution of the future of construction should allow us to upskill people quite quickly if we do it appropriately.
Thank you, Toby. Sadly, we're almost out of time. I'm going to do a very quick fire round, if it were. And I'll just turn to each of you in turn, Trudi, Luigi, and Toby. What do you consider are the main barriers to making platforms happen? Trudi.
Culture. Attitude needs to change, and the way that we work and the way that we see competition versus collaboration needs to change. But I think there's an awful lot of people who see the opportunities now, realize how big an impact we can make, and I'm seeing more and more people, regardless of their current perspectives, coming together to address those challenges and barriers.
Thank you. Luigi?
For me, the key word is collaboration. So that is quite linked to culture, but yes, collaboration is the key word.
And Toby?
Well, culture trumps strategy every time. Other people have said that before. So I will go with proof of concept. I think we need some successful platforms that are delivered in the marketplace that customers see value in, and if it's a building, want to live in, and that the manufacturers themselves can manage the risk and make some money in. So proof of concept, successful for both sides of the equation.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you. We'll draw to a close now. I could carry on this conversation for another 2 hours, but people have to go and have lives. So thank you all for joining me for this conversation. It's been fascinating. Thank you also to the people who've joined us online, and we've had people coming in from all over the world. It's been quite amazing to see you all. The digest that Luigi has alluded to are available here. There's links on this slide, and we'll be showing the slides and those links towards the shortly after the session, and we'll be providing a recording of the session as well in due course through email and our usual channels. When the call finishes, or the webinar finishes, you'll be presented with a survey of 10 questions. It'd be great if you could complete the survey for us. It takes a minute or two, just to let us know what you thought about the session today, where we can do things better. We're always looking to learn. And if you'd like more information about the N+ and what we're working on, please do drop by our website or drop us an email there where you can register for our newsletter, and we'll be able to tell you about the latest news and events. So that's all. Trudi, Luigi, and Toby, thank you again. I look forward to continuing this conversation offline, maybe once the pub's open, over a pint.
I'll hold you to that.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your participation.